Look, I know how this sounds. Another 20-something backpacker with a trust fund and daddy issues, right? Finding myself across 3 continents like some cliche from a gap year brochure. But hear me out. I'm Andrew. And yeah, I was trying to find myself. As corny as that sounds. Klamath, born and raised, bro. Those mountains taught me everything about reading terrain, surviving in the backcountry, and respecting the wilderness. By the time I turned 25, I'd already knocked out some serious treks. We're talking the Andes in Peru, where the altitude will drop you if you're not careful. The Cameron Highlands in Malaysia during monsoon season. 3 weeks solo in the Yukon Territory, where the grizzlies outnumber the people about 50 to 1. Hell, I even did a walkout in the Australian outback with nothing but a water filter and some emergency rations. The point is, I wasn't some tourist with brand new gear and zero experience. I knew my stuff, could set up camp in a whiteout, navigate by stars, identify edible plants, the whole ordeal. But the steppes of Europe? That was the only place I've ever been legitimately afraid I was going to die. Not hypothermia, not dehydration, not getting lost. Something else entirely. Something that made me understand why some places have warnings that go way deeper than stay unmarked trails. This was about 10 years ago, when I was still stupid enough to think experience trumped local knowledge every single time. I was working my way across Eastern Europe, planning to hit all the major trail systems, from the Carpathians down through the Balkans. Had this whole route mapped out on my GPS watch, hotels booked, the works. Not exactly the most popular trekking route, but that's what appealed to me. Lesser known trails, none of that overcrowded Alps bullshit, where you're basically walking in a conga line of German tourists. I'd done my research, knew the area could be tricky navigation-wise since there aren't many landmarks, but I had good topo maps and did solid GPS backup. The weather looked stable. I was carrying a week's worth of food, plenty of water purification tablets, standard cold weather gear even though it was late spring. The locals weren't exactly enthusiastic about my plans. This old guy at the outdoor supply shop kept shaking his head when I showed him my route. Stay on trails, stay near roads, he kept saying in broken English. Not go through tall grass alone. I figured it was the usual rural paranoia about outsiders, maybe some old Soviet-era superstitions about wandering around in restricted zones. Plus, my Romanian was garbage, and his English wasn't much better, so I figured we were just having a communication breakdown. Should have listened. The border crossing from Moldova into Romania was more of a hassle than I'd expected. There's no real infrastructure for foot traffic at most of these crossings. They're designed for cars and trucks, not some American with a backpack trying to walk between countries. The Moldovan guards barely glanced at my passport, but the Romanian side was different. The officer looked maybe 25, probably bored out of his mind working this remote crossing. He flipped through my passport, asking me a bunch of questions in broken English about where I was going, how long I planned to stay, and whether I had accommodations booked. When I explained I was planning to hike overland down through to the Balkans, his expression changed. He called over an older guard, and they had a rapid conversation in Romanian that I couldn't follow. Finally, the older guy looked at me and said, "You have guide?" "No guide. I'm experienced. I have maps, GPS." More Romanian between them. Then the younger officer held out his hand in that universal gesture that means one thing. I slipped him a €20 note, and suddenly my paperwork was in order. But as I was shouldering my pack to leave, the older guard grabbed my arm. His English was better than I'd expected. "You stay on marked trails only. Keep near farms. If you find tall grass, stay out. It's dangerous." I thanked him and reassured him I'd be careful, but I could see it in his eyes he didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. He was right. I should have asked him what kind of danger, should have pressed him for details instead of just nodding and walking away like I knew better. Instead, I crossed into Romania thinking I'd just gotten the standard tourist warning about wolves or wild boar. Maybe some concern about unexploded ordnance from old conflicts. I had no idea they were trying to save my life. The first 2 days went exactly as planned. Made good time. Terrain was manageable. Weather held up. The hostels were warm and friendly, but I was burning through more miles than I expected on the established trails, and my GPS was showing this game trail that would cut about 15 miles off my route to the next resupply point. 15 miles is huge when you're carrying a full pack. Game trails are usually pretty reliable. Animals know the easiest paths better than any human trail designer. So, I went off trail. The game trail was solid at first. Well worn, maybe 2 feet wide, cutting straight through this endless sea of tall grass and scrubland. The steps out here wasn't like anything I'd seen before. Not prairie grass like in the Midwest, or the scrubland I was used to from California. This stuff grew in thick, irregular clumps, some patches knee-high, others reaching almost to my chest, dense enough that you couldn't see more than maybe 20 yards in any direction. My topo maps showed this whole area as intermittent farmland and low-lying scrub, but on the ground, it was just grass, endless and tall, swallowing the horizon. It felt like the map was a lie, and I'd wandered into some nature preserve or government land. Maybe some large industrial farm had gone fallow for years. What it felt like most was that I'd walked into a part of the country that wasn't supposed to be there, or walked back in time. The landscape was almost primordial. I'd been following the trail for about an hour when things started feeling off. Hard to explain exactly what I mean by that. You know how in the mountains you can feel weather changes in your bones before the barometer drops? This was similar, but different somehow, like the landscape itself was subtly off-kilter. The wind patterns weren't making sense. I'd feel a breeze from the east, then a few steps later, it would shift completely, coming from the south, then die altogether. But the grass wasn't moving with it consistently. Some patches would sway normally, others would stay perfectly still, even when I could feel the wind on my face. I stopped, did a full 360-degree scan like I'd been trained, listened hard. The usual step sounds were there. Insects, some distant bird calls, the constant whisper of grass moving against itself. Nothing obviously threatening, but my gut was telling me something different. That's when I heard the thunder of hoofs. A whole group of wild boar came crashing through the grass, maybe 30 yards to my left, running flat out like something was chasing them. Must have been 8 or 10 of them, including a massive sow that had to weigh 300 pounds easy. They were moving perpendicular to my trail and didn't even seem to notice me. My heart rate spiked for a second. Wild boars are no joke if they decide you're a threat, but they were clearly running from something, not me. Probably spooked by my scent and bolting for safer territory. I laughed at myself, took a drink of water and kept walking, but that feeling of being watched never went away. And now I was starting to notice other things. Patches of grass that seemed to move independently, flowing in patterns that didn't match the wind, always just at the edge of my peripheral vision, always stopping the moment I turned to look directly. Something was tracking me through the grass, something that knew how to stay hidden. I had maybe 2 seconds between seeing the grass part and the thing hitting me. It came from directly ahead, staying so low to the ground that I barely caught the movement. Just this ripple in the grass like a boulder rolling downhill. Except boulders don't move that fast, and they sure as hell don't have teeth. I did what I thought would work with aggressive wildlife, threw my pack hard to the left, hoping to distract it, and dove right into the thickest patch of grass I could see. It was a gamble, but I figured anything was better than just standing there. The thing didn't even glance at my pack. I hit the ground and immediately tried to roll, get my feet back under me. But something clamped down on my left leg just above the ankle, like a steel trap covered in sandpaper. The pressure was incredible, like it was going to snap my tibia in half. Then, it started dragging me. I'm telling you, I've been in situations before. Rock slides, flash floods, and even had a mountain lion stalk me for half a day in the Sierras. But getting dragged backwards through tall grass by something you can't even see clearly, that's a whole different kind of terror. My hands clawed at everything, grass roots, rocks, anything to slow down the drag. The thing was hauling me like I weighed nothing. maybe 30 or 40 yards through this maze of vegetation. I could hear my jacket tearing, felt the ground scraping against my back and shoulders. My hiking pants were getting shredded against whatever was holding me. I tried to twist around to see what had me, maybe get a good kick in with my free leg. But every time I lifted my head, all I could make out was this shape that seemed to shift and blur, like it was made of the same grass and earth it was moving through. Then suddenly, it let go. I scrambled backwards on my hands and ass, putting distance between us and whatever was out there, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. My leg was on fire where it had grabbed me, but everything still moved, which meant nothing was broken. The grass around me was completely still. No movement, no sound except my own ragged breathing. But I knew it was still there, watching me. I sat there in the grass for maybe 30 seconds, trying to get my breathing under control, when I noticed something was wrong with my leg. The bite marks were deeper than I thought, 4 puncture wounds, 2 on each side of my calf, like it had grabbed me with oversized fangs. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was how the skin around the wounds was already starting to change color. At first, I thought it was just blood pooling under the skin, normal bruising from the pressure. But bruises don't spread that fast, and they sure as hell don't turn that shade of greenish black. The discoloration was creeping outward from each puncture, maybe a ½ inch in diameter already, and I could feel this weird tingling sensation moving up toward my knee. Venom. The thing had ejected me with something. I've been bitten by rattlesnakes before. An occupational hazard when you spend enough time in the California backcountry. I know what venom feels like as it starts working through your system. This was different though. Rattlesnake venom burns. This felt cold, like ice water spreading through my veins. My hands were shaking as I rolled up my pant leg to get a better look. The puncture wounds weren't bleeding much, but the skin around them was starting to swell. When I pressed on the discolored area, I couldn't feel my finger. The numbness was spreading faster than the discoloration. I had to move. Now, whatever this thing had pumped into me, I couldn't let it reach my core circulation. If it got to my heart or lungs before I found help, I was done. I pulled my belt off, wrapped it around my thigh as tight as I could stand, and buckled it. The pressure was immediate and brutal, but it would slow the venom's spread, maybe buy me a few hours. My pack was still sitting where I'd thrown it, about 20 yards away. I could see the thing hadn't touched it, which meant it was either gone or waiting to see what I'd do next. I couldn't worry about that now. I needed my first aid kit, my GPS, and whatever water I had left. The nearest help was less than a few hours' hike if I pushed hard. I just had to make it that far before my leg rotted off. I made it maybe half a mile before I had to stop relying on both legs. The hiking pole became a crutch, taking most of my weight while I dragged my left leg behind me. Every step sent jolts of pain up through my hip, but the alternative was worse. The weird thing was how quiet everything had gotten. No more rustling in the grass, no sense of being stalked. At first, I thought it was good news. Maybe the thing had given up, moved on to easier prey. Then I realized what was actually happening. It didn't need to hunt me anymore. The venom would do the work for it. All the thing had to do was follow at a distance and wait for the poison to drop me. Then it could feed at its leisure. The thought made me push harder, even though my leg was starting to look like something out of a medical textbook. The swelling had gotten so bad that I had to cut my pant leg open with my utility knife. The discoloration had spread past my knee, creeping up my thigh in these twisted, vein-like patterns that looked awful. I was following what looked like an animal trail, hoping it would lead me to higher ground where I could get my bearings. When the grass opened up into this shallow depression, maybe 15 feet across, carved into the earth like a giant's footprint, that's when I saw them. Eggs, dozens of them, clustered in the center of the depression like some kind of reptilian nursery. Each one was about the size of a football, with shells so thin they were almost transparent. I could see things moving inside, dark shapes that shifted and pulsed with their own rhythm. But what made my stomach drop wasn't the movement. It was the color changes. The things inside the eggs were cycling through different hues: brown, green, gray, like they were practicing camouflage before they even hatched. I'd stumbled into a breeding ground. The adult that had bitten me wasn't protecting the territory, it was protecting its young. And if there were eggs that developed, there were probably other adults nearby. Maybe a whole family of these things waiting in the grass around the nest. I backed away from the depression as quietly as I could, trying not to disturb anything, trying not to think about how many more of them might be out there. My leg felt like it was on fire now, the numbness replaced by this deep, throbbing ache that pulsed with my heartbeat. I had to get out of here. I had to get away from this nest and away from this entire area. However far these things claimed as their hunting ground, I needed to be beyond it before the venom finished whatever it was doing to me. I gripped my hiking pole tighter and started moving again, twice as fast as before, even though every step felt like my leg might snap in half. An hour later, I forced myself to stop. My body was shutting down whether I liked it or not. I found a patch of slightly higher ground where I could see maybe 50 yards in each direction and collapsed against my pack. The GPS said I still had 5 miles to the nearest buildings marked on the map. A farm probably, maybe a small village. 5 miles normally wouldn't even register as a real hike, but with my leg the way it was, it might as well have been 100. I made myself eat half a protein bar and drink some water, even though my stomach was cramping up. Dehydration would kill me faster than the venom if I weren't careful. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, following basic wilderness survival protocols while something actively tried to digest me from the inside out. This wasn't the first time I'd been in serious trouble in the back country. I got bit by a diamondback in Joshua Tree about 6 years ago. Had to hike 4 miles back to the trailhead with my leg swollen up like a balloon. Spent 3 days in the hospital. But I made it out. There was that time in Colorado when I got my foot wedged under a boulder during a river crossing. Took me 2 hours to work myself free, and by then, hypothermia was setting in from the snow melt. I was shaking so hard I could barely grip my gear, but I got myself to shelter and rode it out. The point is, I've been hurt before. I've been scared before. I knew how to push through when everything in your body is telling you to quit, but this was different. Those other times, I knew what I was dealing with. Snakebite, hypothermia, dehydration. There are protocols for that stuff. Treatment options. This thing that had bitten me, I had no idea what its venom was designed to do, how fast it worked, what the end game looked like. I caught myself starting to roll up my pant leg to check the wound and stopped. I didn't want to know. Whatever was happening down there, looking at it wasn't going to help anything. All it would do was freak me out more. Maybe make me panic when I needed to stay focused. 5 miles. That was the only number that mattered now. I shouldered my pack, adjusted my grip on the hiking pole, and started moving again. 1 step at a time, like always, just like every other mountain I'd ever climbed, every trail I'd ever finished. The difference was, this time, the mountain was trying to kill me from the inside. I was maybe 2 miles closer to the farm when I saw it again. This time, I had the advantage. I was coming up a slight rise, using my hiking pole to pull myself along, when something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the grass looked odd about 30 yards ahead, or maybe my subconscious picked up on movement that didn't match the wind patterns. Whatever it was, I dropped low and stayed perfectly still. At first, I couldn't make out anything unusual, just more of the same endless grass swaying in the afternoon breeze. Then the breeze stopped, and one patch kept moving. The thing was massive, easily 12 feet long, maybe more, with the bulk of a saltwater crocodile, but completely different in every other way. Instead of 4 legs, it had 6, 3 on each side, spaced evenly along its body like some kind of prehistoric centipede. But the weirdest part was watching its skin change. I'd seen chameleons do their color-shifting thing before, but this was on a completely different level. The creature's hide rippled and flowed through different patterns, brown earth tones, green grass colors, even the dappled shadows where sunlight filtered through the vegetation. It wasn't just changing color, It was changing texture too, mimicking the look of dried grass stalks and broken earth so perfectly that even knowing exactly where it was, I kept losing track of its outline. The hit was pure nightmare fuel, flat and white, kind of like a cobra, but proportioned for something 10 times bigger. When it turned slightly, I could see these yellow eyes scanning the area with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't some dumb predator operating on instinct. This thing was thinking. 6 legs. I'd been hiking and camping for over a decade, studied wildlife biology in college, and spent time with rangers and naturalists all over the world. Nothing I'd heard of had 6 legs and looked like that. This was something completely unknown. Something that had been hiding out here for who knows how long. I had to get a picture. Nobody would believe this without proof. And if I didn't make it out, at least there would be evidence of what killed me. Moving as slowly as possible, I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket. No service, like I expected, but the camera still worked. I lined up the shot, zoomed in as much as I could, and held my breath. The shutter click seemed to echo across the entire step. The creature's head snapped toward me instantly, those yellow eyes locking onto my position with terrifying precision. I pressed myself into the grass, trying to become part of the landscape, but I could hear it moving now, not the heavy thrashing I'd expected, but this smooth, almost silent gliding sound as it flowed through the vegetation toward me. I closed my eyes and tried to stop breathing. My leg was throbbing in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I was sure the thing could smell the infection. The venom, whatever chemical markers I was throwing off as its poison did its work. The sounds stopped maybe 10 yards away. I could feel it there, waiting, testing the air. Seconds crawled by like hours. Then finally, the gliding sound moved away, heading off toward the east. I waited another 5 minutes before I dared to lift my head. It was gone, but I knew it might circle back. These things were smart, patient. I had to move fast. I checked the photo on my phone. Blurry, but you could make out the basic shape, the weird proportions, the 6 legs. If I made it to that farm, this would change everything. Cryptozoologists would lose their minds. But first, I had to survive the next 2 miles with a leg that felt like it was dissolving from the inside out. The last half mile was pure hell. My vision kept swimming in and out of focus, and I was leaning so heavily on the hiking pole that my shoulder felt like it was going to dislocate. Every step sent waves of nausea through my system, but I could see the buildings ahead, the long industrial structures that had to be some kind of agricultural operation. I stumbled through a gap in a wire fence and onto a dirt road. My legs gave out about 50 yards from the nearest building, and I hit the ground hard, my hiking pole clattering away across the gravel. Voices started shouting in Romanian, footsteps running toward me. I tried to sit up, tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out as gibberish. Through the haze, I could make out the word agro-industriale painted across one of the buildings, but the rest of the company name kept shifting and blurring like it was underwater. Strong hands lifted me, and I heard someone curse when they saw my leg. One of the workers, a middle-aged guy in coveralls, was pointing at the wound and shouting, "Ambulance, ambulance," to someone with a radio. Another voice, older, gravelly, said something that included, "Ballard de yarbe." The words sent a chill through the other workers. They all started talking at once, their voices tight with what sounded like genuine fear. Grass dragon. Even through the venom haze, I understood that much. They knew about these things. They had a name for them. My breathing was getting more labored, each inhale feeling like I was trying to suck air through wet concrete. The world was tilting sideways, and I couldn't tell if I was laying down or standing up anymore. I was rolled over, and my mind felt like it short-circuited. The steps I had walked through was gone, just vanished. Where before there was an endless sea of grass, now it was what looked like miles of farmland. Surely, this must have been just an effect of the venom. I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember clearly was the interior of an ambulance, the rhythmic bump of tires on asphalt, and a paramedic working over my leg while speaking rapid-fire Romanian into a radio. The siren seemed to be coming from very far away, like I was on the water. Then everything went black. I'm sitting in my study right now, looking at a printout of that photo, 10 years later, and still it's the only proof I have that any of this really happened. The image quality is terrible. You can barely make out the creature's outline through the grass, and the 6 legs just look like shadows and vegetation to most people. I've shown it to cryptozoologists, wildlife biologists, and even posted it on forums dedicated to unknown species. The response is always the same. Obviously photoshopped, or camera artifact, or my personal favorite, nice try, but we can spot a fake from a mile away. I don't blame them. If someone had shown me this picture before my trip to Romania, I would have said the same thing. I roll up my pant leg and look at the scars. 4 puncture marks, 2 on each side of my calf. The skin around them is still slightly discolored, like old bruising that never quite faded. Sometimes when the weather changes, the whole area aches with a deep, bone-level pain that reminds me exactly how close I came to never making it home. The hospital records from Redacted are pretty sparse. I was there for 6 days, apparently, though I only remember fragments. IV drips, doctors speaking in rapid Romanian, someone asking me questions in broken English about what had bitten me. When I tried to explain about the creature, about the camouflage and the 6 legs, they just nodded politely and wrote something down that probably translated to, "Patient is delusional from venom exposure." The flight back to the States is mostly a blur too. I was still pretty messed up, running on whatever cocktail of antibiotics and antivenoms that pumped into me. But I made it home. And after a few months of physical therapy, I was almost back to normal. Almost. I still hike, still travel, but I'm different now in ways that are hard to explain to people who haven't been to where I've been. When locals tell me not to go somewhere, I listen. When my gut says something feels off about a trail or a campsite, I trust it. And when I'm in a remote country, I pay attention to sounds that don't belong and movements that feel off or don't match the wind. Because I learned something out there that no amount of wilderness experience had taught me before. The world is bigger and stranger than any of us wants to admit. There are things out there, creatures, that evolution forgot to tell us about. Ecosystems that operate by rules we haven't figured out yet. And sometimes, no matter how prepared you think you are, hubris can be just as deadly as anything with teeth and venom